All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Welcome to the PM Therapy Podcast. My name is Mukhtar, and I am here with John. John is a really awesome guest that I'm really looking forward to talking to on this topic. So we're gonna go through John's career. He started out as a librarian, and now he's a PM thought leader. But as we go through that, as we have this discussion, we're gonna go talk about like a lot of themes and struggles that many PMs face. But without further ado, I'm just gonna let John introduce himself. So, John, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mukhtar. I'm really pleased to be here. John Connolly. I work with scaling strategies. I am the project management person at Scaling Strategies, doing training, coaching, lots of programs, structured workshops, all kinds of great things. And yeah, I started out doing a whole lot of different things, and from like working nights in a tile factory to waiting tables to working in a shoe store, all the way out to, and then I got into librarianship, right? I went to school, master's degree in library studies, University of Alabama, Roll Tide Roll. And, the development of the career arc there over the course of about 12, 15 years, depending on how you slice it, burned out hard, went into formal project management. I've been managing a lot of projects as a librarian. I got my PMP and transitioned into like software implementation projects, something I had done earlier in my career. And from there, it was off and running, right? Doing a lot of communicating, doing a lot of networking, doing a lot of reading, doing a lot of growing.
Right.
And it's been fun, right? It's been years now that I've like been fully in the PM space. It's been about, I think, 4 years now,
Okay.
3.5 years now that I'm just PM. I'm not like
Right.
also librarian.
Right. And right now, I think you are among the top 20 or top 50 PMs. Right.
Oh,
And
you mean in terms of the posts and everything, the readership?
right,
And
right. Like I think you're on the Favicon list as one of the top PMs,
I
right?
was last year. I think I was like, I don't know, like 19 or 20 or something
Right.
like that. I don't think I'm on it right now in the top 20.
Right.
But that's okay. I'm connected with most all of those folks on those lists, and they're good. They're good lists of people to follow, especially if you're trying to like move into project management. You want to get a sense of the discussion and discourse going on.
Right. By the way, what do you think of those lists?
Oh, the lists. I mean, they're nice. I don't. I'm happy to be on them when I'm on them, but
Right.
oh, it's not like there's a panel of people making a decision, right? It's also like algorithm driven and metrics driven, and that's all outside of my control.
Right.
So it's nice and it's gratifying to be part of those lists. I'm not going to knock the lists at all. It would mean a little more to me if it was like, the panel of experts at PMI has reviewed my stuff and they really
Right.
thought it was great, but that's not the world in which we live.
Right. And uh just for the viewers and listeners. So I think John, you've been putting out content for a while, because I remember even before I started just doubling down on the PM space. I remember seeing you, and I think you were recognized as a thought leader from way back when, right? So is that right? You started this a while back,
I
correct?
did. I've been on LinkedIn for over 15 years.
Hmm.
It's been a long time. But when I was in librarianship, I had like 900 connections.
Hmm.
And when I decided to make the shift out, this is 3, 4 years ago now, I had 900 connections still. And just started writing.
Hmm.
I started reading, I started writing, I started connecting with people. It was a very exciting time to be on LinkedIn. It was a very creative time to be on LinkedIn. Things have shifted a little bit in the past 3 years,
Hmm.
and that's okay. I don't mind that. But I made some really supportive connections, and people reached out and guided me, and I started getting into groups, and I started getting into DMs, and
Mm.
it really just kind of blossomed from there.
Right.
I've grown slowly on my followership, right? It's been, and as I'm targeting like my own flavor of stuff.
Mm.
And we'll talk a little bit about that perspective, I'm sure.
Mm.
But I'm looking for people who are picking up what I'm putting down, right? And so it's grown slowly, consistently, but slowly. I'm about 15,000 followers as of the recording of this podcast.
Mm.
And that's great. It's a good supportive group, and that's very, very good for me. And I've enjoyed it. It's a community.
Right, right. Yeah, no, and the reason I brought that up because I remember, you being like I remember like you, Logan, you know,
Hmm.
I remember, then just looking at what you were doing and really admiring what you people were doing. So, yeah, okay, let's start from the very beginning. So,
Okay.
why did you decide to study? What I mean, like, what would you call your major? Library information? Like, what would you call you?
Yeah. So as librarianship, information science. Okay. How did I get in? It was
Right.
an accident. It
Okay.
wasn't supposed to be. So I was in school, I was in college, I was in the work study program where like you are employed and they give you discount on your tuition because
Mhm.
I didn't have a lot of money. And I was assigned to work in the kitchens, and they gave me my slip, and I walked down to the kitchens. I talked to the head chef, really gruff guy, like not very friendly at all. And he said, "Well, I want to see your class schedule." So I gave him my class schedule, and he threw it back at me. He said, "Get out, I can't use you," because I had all morning classes,
Hmm.
and he only had openings for people at breakfasts. He's like, "You
Okay.
can't do it." So I went back to the work study lady, and she had to reprocess me. And then I got a slip in my mailbox that said, "You're assigned to the library. Go report into the library." So I went down to the library. This is like a week and a half later, right? I went down and they said, "Well, we've already given away all of our regular work study slots." Usually they have the students do paging, right? Where they just check the shelves, make sure everything is in order. It's very
Okay.
tedious work. It's
Sorry,
necessary
John.
work. Mhm.
Sorry to interrupt. So, are we talking university? Like,
Mm.
we're
This
talking.
is it was a small Christian college in Virginia, and it is a private college,
Okay.
and they only had like 400 students, but they
Oh.
had a pretty decent like 3-story library that they opened while I was there. And it was, you know, new territory for me, right?
Hmm.
Um, and they didn't have any slots for me. They said, "Go upstairs to the 3rd floor and help out in the cataloging department." And that was where I learned mark records, leading indicators, data management. Like I started down that path, and I was there for 3.5 years.
Okay.
And I was there over the summers as well. And I was processing hundreds and hundreds of books into the collection, taking care of a rare book redesign, all these different things.
Hmm.
And I got out of college and I went and did other things. You know, I was a journalist for a suburban newspaper in Philadelphia.
Hmm.
I was a bank teller, and then I got a job in libraries again. I was subcontracted for a cataloging project at the government publishing office in Washington D.C., and
Okay.
that's where they do all of the publications of all of Congress's materials. They all have to be published and printed. So I was working in a printing factory,
Hmm.
doing cataloging of like a whole bunch of different stuff. And then from there, I got into library school, and that's University of Alabama at that point, right? Is a distance program. I was the 4th cohort to go through for countrywide distance learning,
Hmm.
and I went to work after my contract ended doing software for libraries.
All right.
So
So,
that's where I got familiar with like agile development, lean, software implementation work.
all right. So, first of all, I didn't know there was like library school. So, after college, you went to library school, and
Yes.
how long is library school?
It was 2 plus 2.5 years.
Okay, so like, what are you? Sorry,
Mhm. No,
this
it's
is
okay.
what are you learning in library school? Sorry, this is
Oh yeah. So it's like foundational principles of the organization of information.
I see.
And some of it's very philosophical and some of it's very practical. I did cataloging and metadata.
Okay.
I did like there's different tracks. Some people are in the public library track. Some
Hmm.
people are generalists. Some people are in school library track, which takes extra coursework because you usually have to get certified as a teacher depending on what state you're in. So it can get a little complicated as to like the specifics of what you study.
Mm,
There was like a capstone for me, and yeah, it was, is broad, but they tried to make it as actionable as possible for me.
okay.
But yeah, for me, it was like frameworks, right?
Mm,
They didn't tell you how to do the job specifically, but they gave you tools and frameworks.
okay. So, and I'm probably going to be asking a lot of very dumb questions because so this is very new to me. So, is it really just how to, like you mentioned, catalog information, how to store and retrieve information? I'm probably butchering all the terms, but
No,
is
it's
that really
yeah, so part of it is theoretically how do you organize information in a way that promotes human access and learning,
okay?
right? That's a big one.
Hmm.
Then beyond that, you're talking about things like how do you conduct research?
Okay.
How do you check citations, sources, do deeper level research for people?
Right.
Um, how do you develop the ability to engage with the customer, right, the patron of the library,
Hmm.
on a in like for research and reference interviews, right? You have to have like an informational bedside manner.
Hmm.
Like all of that stuff kind of gets developed while you're in school, but again, it's school, it's a master's program.
Right.
But it's not exactly the same thing as vocational school.
Hmm.
But it's driven by like, what is the cultural paradigm in our world right now? How does librarianship fit in it? How do we build structures of information management? Some of it's very abstract. Sometimes some of the stuff I struggled with on the abstract level. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where it was for me back then. I'm sure it's different now because life has changed a lot in the last 15 plus years.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to know like how AI is sort of disrupting that space. But okay, so now you come out to the real world. You're a librarian.
Mhm.
Um, when do you get into project management?
Yeah, so I finished my time doing software implementation, right? I was training. And so I was also doing go live for people. And I traveled all over the country doing implementation of software for librarians.
So were you
Um,
doing this in a particular company
yeah,
or
yeah, I was with a company that specializes in this.
gotcha.
And then after that, I got my first like real librarian job at at a small special like private library. That's they do like equestrian sports is their theme,
Hmm.
and very highly specialized. And when I got there, the collection was a mess.
Oh,
Nothing was cataloged, nothing was findable, everything was disorganized. There were damaged books that had never been repaired. I mean, these are books from like the 1700s that
hmm.
had never been repaired. Archives of boxes and boxes of things that needed to be sorted through and processed. We were out of space. We need to build more space, more cabinets, more revisions here and there. And they're all projects, all of them. And I like to tell the story, right? I was the assistant to the head librarian.
Okay.
And then the head librarian quit 2 weeks after I started. So I was battlefield promoted. I was in charge of everything from that point forward. And um and I started the 2 weeks after she quit. We had our board of directors meeting, very high powered board of directors. And they brought me in. They said, give a full report. So I gave them a full report of all the problems, but I didn't bring solutions. I only brought problems. And I told them about all these things, and they said, okay, so what's your plan? And I almost laughed at them. I was like, I don't have a plan. I've been here for a cup of coffee. Um, but I said, I will, by the time we meet again, I will have a plan for you. And that's when I became a project manager. That's
Mm,
when I started to exert like ownership over the outcomes
mm,
of what needed to happen. And what happened over the course of the next 5 years is I bootstrapped myself into being a project manager. I
mm,
didn't have the vocabulary, but
right.
I cobbled together project management practice with some of the things that I knew from my agile software world
Mm,
and other like things I just came up with that seemed like good ideas. And later on, when I went and got my PMP, it was very enlightening. I'm like, oh, hey, I already do a lot of this stuff. I just didn't know that it was a real thing with its own vocabulary.
right, right. So before you took on this librarian job, you were implementing software. So, you're pretty familiar with Agile there. So,
Yes.
all right. So, did you know Agile like as a concept and the methodology, or was it just something that you were doing, but you later?
Yeah, it was a Scrum and Kanban.
Okay. So
So
you're
that was my background, and that's where I got my love of sticky notes was from Kanban, because we
right.
did everything in Kanban for a lot of our internal work, and I was doing internal work. And so this is before Trello, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is before a lot of digital like we designed and built an online Kanban board system for ourselves as a company
Okay.
because we didn't have anything for us that was digital. Before that, everything on sticky notes.
Mm-hmm. And were you familiar with, like, did you know Agile then? Like, this is the Agile methodology, or were you
Yeah.
just okay? Okay. So you're familiar.
Yeah, and now the thing is that I wasn't developing the software. So
Mm-hmm.
but I was embedded in teams that did, daily scrum, and I stayed all night for hackathons and things like that they were doing that were based on that um the agile methodology, right? Specifically Scrum. So yeah, I was part of it. I was involved in it. It was a little fluid. We weren't like strictly following the Scrum guide.
Right.
It was, I guess, Scrum ban if you want, but it was very helpful for me for framing up like a project mindset.
Okay. No, that's interesting. And I think, you know, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like many PM's journey is more traditional project management and then later on agile. Um,
Hmm.
at least I know that was my journey. But I think yours is interesting. Is that you started out with agile and then I guess you now ventured out into the other types.
Yeah, I went much more traditional.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like walking up a mountain.
Hmm.
So it was one of those, everything was very linear and a lot of dependencies in my work in the library. In the
Hmm.
software development, it wasn't. It was just like these atomized, iterative endeavors.
Right.
Mine was like maybe waterfall in sprints a lot of time.
Right.
Um, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. So I went from agile to hybrid at best, and then I found that like traditional more methodologies worked better. And so I just kind of like slowly slid further and further along the scale.
Right.
And I'm never going to be a methodology purist. Like that's just not me. I
Right.
think you should find whatever works because that's how I started and that's how I succeeded.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, I don't know why we have these wars, but anyway, let's go to your time, as the librarian, where you had these projects that you needed to deliver on.
Hmm.
So what kind of projects were you doing, right? So you met the
Yeah.
board, and they're like, okay, come up with your plan. So what kind of projects happen in the library space?
Yeah. So it depends on how you want to slice it, right? Were there a bunch of projects under a single program? Was there one project with lots of different moving parts? That's kind of an academic question, and I kind of don't care, like how you would classify it, right? What we had, so the first thing first, no one could find any books. They were all on shelves, but you couldn't find what you were looking for. The way books were cataloged is They had a little pencil marking inside the front cover with 3 letters on it, and then that was where it belonged, and nothing lived where it needed to be. There was no signage. There was no digital catalog. So we had to catalog the whole collection. That's 25,000 books, many of them rare books dating back to 1523. We had to just devise a way to label these books because they were all out of print. We had to label the books without damaging the books. So we had to come up with, how do we label these things without putting a sticker on them? We had to identify and catalog periodicals from the 19th century. There's big newspaper bindings. We had to accession, which just means like go through and add into the collection. 25 boxes of archival material that had been waiting, and then more coming. We had construction projects. We had to commission custom cabinetry, and we had like rolling stacks where there was a track built into the floor, and the stacks would roll. You could crank them and they would get, so that you could save space. But we had to get new ones added because we didn't have the space. So that was another project that needed to be done. And we had to redo the rare books collection, and we had to paint the whole library again. We had to replace the roof. And like there were many different projects that all had risks associated with them.
Right.
And then dependencies as to which elements of the project needed to finish in which order. And then on top of that, we didn't have any money. So I had to fundraise for my projects. We were at a small like nonprofit museum and library, and I had to fundraise. And that meant we put on like fancy dinners, and I put on like a book repair a book repair evening where people could like adopt a book and like donate the hundreds and hundreds of dollars necessary to get that book repaired. There's like all of these things, and then I'm managing vendors, I'm managing contracts, I'm managing book repairs, I'm all of those things, right? All of those are projects, and they're all like tied together, and I had to be the integration point for that.
And how are you managing all of this? Because like these are complex projects, and I imagine even high stakes projects, because you have to report back to the board.
Yes.
So like how are you, like who's teaching you the craft, so to speak?
Right. I learned from, we call it School of Hard Knocks. You get knocked down, you get back up. There was no one who could teach me the craft of project management per se in this organization. What I had in place was a governance committee from my board of directors.
Okay.
So, but I also I was in charge of right sizing the governance, right? I had to make sure I wasn't running back to them every 5 minutes, but I also had to learn a sense of what I needed to get permission for. The other thing is I was gifted a very talented and very supportive executive director who told me straight up, she said, I don't know librarianship. You do. So you should, she gave me the key. The key was, come to me with a plan and a course of action you want to take, and I will tell you if it's possible.
Okay.
And that was it, right? That was, here, you got the keys to the car. You're going to drive it, and I'm going to tell you if you need to make a left or right turn. But it was me. It was the accountability there. And all I really had was a little bit of agile background, my training from library school, and my proactivity. That's really all it was, right? And I landed that job because all the other finalists were not really as proactive as I was in my interviews. And then I had to lean on that and learn how to delegate, because we did hire a librarian to work under me.
Okay.
And that learning, that gap, that jump from worker to leader was very, very difficult. Because I had to learn to let go of certain things and to think strategically.
Right. That's a common challenge that many people have when they move from IC to people management. Yeah. But let me ask you one question. So do you think that a PM who doesn't have experience in the librarian space can come in and do a good job managing projects, right? So assuming you didn't
Yeah,
have the librarian background, would you have been able to come in and successfully execute?
maybe, but it would have been harder,
Okay.
honestly. Now, that's so like that's a complicated question.
Mhm.
So like on the one hand, I think project managers need enough technical expertise in their subject area to fully understand the nature of the problems. And I struggled with having too much technical expertise. I'll admit that, right? I was too close to it. I just looked around and I saw all the problems all the time, and it was overwhelming.
Hmm.
Um, but things would have been missed if I didn't have that, right? There would have been more problems if I didn't have any background in the librarian stuff.
Right.
But just take a step further backward and look at it from a broader perspective. Librarians do many projects all the time. They just don't have the project management frameworks and structure and support.
Mhm.
They don't have that vocabulary or the processes that help them. But project management could give that to them as like a discipline. Project management could help them. But librarians have a lot that they can give to project management as well, because there's a lot of really creative approaches to project work that's done in project management. And really the thing that kind of turned the page for me on this question was a little tiny book I read that's published by the American Library Association by Carly Wiggins Searcy, and it was called Project Management in Libraries. and I was like, what is this? And I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, this is good. Like, I need that. And that's when I started considering getting my PMP.
Okay. So no, that's really fascinating. So you mentioned that there is like the librarian space. I keep on calling it the librarian space.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not really an industry, but yeah.
Yeah, like the librarian space can benefit from the rigor when it comes to execution that project management
Yeah.
has. But the other way around, like what can project managers learn and benefit from the librarian space? Like what are maybe tools, frameworks, or things in the librarian space that the project management field can benefit from?
Yeah. So let me turn it back around to you on Mukhtar. What have you done in a project where you ran short on budget?
What have I done in a project where I ran short on budget? Well, let, I hope I understand this question, but
Yeah, you ever run short on budget? What just the basic, like what do you do as a project manager? What's your step?
okay, if you're short on budget,
Mhm.
you have there are several options. Either you defer scope,
Mhm.
right? Or yeah, I think that's one thing that you can defer scope, saying, okay, this is going to be in phase 2.
Yeah.
Um
But
yeah.
sometimes you may have to go back and, change request, right? Change order. Say like, look, if you want me to accomplish this, it's going to take a little more, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And that's all that's a
If
thing that
that's an
happens.
option, if that's an option, okay. Like so, you're
Yeah, of
saying that,
course, if that's an option.
yeah.
Now, imagine you've been given a scope and you've been given a schedule and your budget is 0.
Okay.
How do you create a project under those conditions?
Mhm.
That's something that librarians are talented at. That like that and people don't understand that like at least half of the programs, and by that I mean like educational programs,
Mhm.
right? That go on in libraries are largely unfunded or they're very, very tiny budgets. Like libraries in our country, here in the United States anyway, they run on volunteer work, right? That's like, can you develop stakeholder relationships enough to get, you know, groups of volunteers to be functional authority environment workers on your team for your project? Can you think outside of the box to find partnering opportunities outside of your project and outside of your organization? You're talking about a very different way of thinking about resource management, because now you are a business partner outside of the organization. You're a representative of the company outside of the organization to create a project, right? That you've been given a mandate, and now you're creating within parameters the scope, right? That you have, how do you operate when you've been given broad latitude over the scope, the content of the scope, but your mandate doesn't go away? These are really useful survival skills that have really served me well as I've grown my PM career, because the conversation you and I are having right now is reflective of that mindset for me, right? That I'm going to partner with people and then grow from there. I'm not super competitive when it comes to like the online community and project management, because I feel like that this is a force multiplier, right? Like this is a big booming benefit, and teachers are the same way, right?
Okay.
Teachers are, they have to do the same sort of thing.
All right. So sorry, John. I just want to make sure I understand.
Mhm.
The point. So if I'm hearing correctly, a lot of times the constraints are a lot when in the librarian
Mhm.
space. Like, a lot of times you're given this huge scope with
Right.
little to no budget, right? And
Right.
you have to make things happen. So you're saying that that's one thing that we can really learn. Like, how can you be creative, still deliver, satisfy
Yeah.
your stakeholders with very little to do that? Is that
Yeah, that's part of it for sure. And another part is, can you, and PMs that are very experienced, they know how to do this, right? But all librarians know how to do this. And that is, go to someone unrelated to your project and ask them to give you resources, budget, time. And that is, I'm going to be real honest with you. What I see from my students, right? People beginning phases project management, mid phase project management, in their careers, they're reluctant to do that.
Hmm.
They're reluctant to own the whole essence of the project, in a deep way, to say like, I'm an advocate for my project. We talk a lot about advocating for yourself in your career.
Mhm.
We talk a lot about managing scope and getting your stakeholders involved. We talk a lot about governance, right? And making sure that those change requests follow the right appropriate path, because we try to constrain change.
Hmm.
But if you have a deeper ownership capacity over your project, and you pair that with creativity in how you're going to make a thing happen, you realize very quickly you need more people to help you, right? And that's, I think, something that project management can learn is, how do you build a community around your project? And that's important. That's important. Like, and that's irreplaceable. If you have someone who can do that, that's a huge difference maker.
Hmm.
And for that, you need to have not just a rudimentary kind of understanding of high level communication. You need a strategic mind.
Hmm.
It's got to be, because you have to see the big picture. And the further into the task level you are, the less likely it is that you're going to grow the community necessary to get the resources that you need to get the project across the finish line.
Okay. So let me put this in the corporate space now, right?
Sure.
So you're saying a project exists in the corporate space. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. So
Sure.
as a project manager, you're saying one thing that we can do is to have is to display more ownership and ensure that you actually build the right community around your project, in the corporate space, so that you can actually take that project to the finish line. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Or
Yes, yes. Yeah, that within a corporate environment. Okay, we'll leave libraries aside, because I've done both. Um, I mean, and this is something maybe we understand instinctively, but there's no like formal anything like in PMBOK or anything about this, right?
Hmm.
And it is, you need to have a relationship with someone in advance of asking them to help you.
Okay.
That there's the other thing, right? We talk a lot about authority, right? Project manager authority, right? Projectized environment or matrix environment and all these things. And it's great. It's wonderful. I totally get it. But the influence level, right? The influence side is based on your ability to build community around your project, or even with yourself, within your department, within your organization. And that's more important to get your project across the finish line than like any amount of frameworks, in my opinion.
All right. So can I push back a bit
Oh,
here?
yeah. Go ahead.
Because like I imagine many PMs listening will be like, yeah, I'm pretty good at influencing without authority. Right. And I know you teach PMs and there are levels to this, right? So
Sure.
what would you say? What would you say to that PM who comes to you and says, yeah, I mean, I don't know what you're going to teach me. Like, yeah,
Sure.
I'm pretty good at, I've been doing this for some time. Like, maybe what I'm asking is push back against me, challenge me, and try to get me to the next level.
Yeah. All right. So I talked recently, like maybe a month ago, with a project manager contract project manager. She's been managing projects for over 10 years. Okay. And she and I spoke, and she had been told, you need to work on your executive presence, right? And her contract had not been renewed. And they said, no, we're not going to keep you, and you have to work on your executive presence. And that's twofold, or morefold, manifold maybe, right? And so we had to talk about like the actual specifics of her situation. But her specific situation, she is one of these project managers, and I just posted about that today, right? Should always came out of the mouth, right? And it's like, I shouldn't have to have done XYZ, right? My manager never met with me. My manager never gave me time, like those sorts of things. And the real thing there is that, yeah, there is a deficit in executive level communication, executive presence, because you're not owning fully what you've got going on in the project, that you're no longer a project manager exactly, right? You're now a strategic guide. You're a strategic partner and guide to help the people at the top of the organization make intelligent decisions related to your project. That's gold. If you can get that, if you can do that. And that's not just influencing, right? That's not going to another manager in another department and saying that if they can give you a report on time. Now you're talking about, can you communicate to the C-suite? And that's more than just, can you put a good PowerPoint together? And it's way more than, can I just put a report together with lots of charts and graphs? Now it's a matter of, can I dial into the strategic plan? Can I understand the metrics and the business analysis that is being done to support the organization's direction? And that's an area where I think most PMs have work to do, because I talked to someone again last week. He's going in for a job interview, and he's meeting with the CIO. And it's like a final interview. He's meeting with the CIO. And I said, okay, have you read their strategic plan? He's like, no. I Googled it. It's right on the website. Downloaded it. Looked through it. There's like 3 big projects that are all getting kicked off this year that would be very relevant for the discussion he's going to have with the CIO. And I'm like, just these are you can say these are common sense things, but they're not that common, because project managers start at the bottom in the tasks, in the weeds, and they negotiate for the sake of the tasks. But that's backwards, right? You got to start negotiating for the sake of the strategic outcome, and then fit the tasks to that. And so you've got to work with eyes up and out, not eyes in and down. So my pushback to you is, I don't see a lot of project managers, early career, mid-career project managers, doing the strategic buy-in necessary to get them to the next level, to get them promoted to senior project manager or even higher, because they're building at the mid and bottom level. And that served us well before we get into a big project, right? I get hired, I get promoted. I'm promoted because I'm a good worker. I have good work ethic. I get in, I roll up my sleeves, I get into the tasks. But once you're up, you got to let that go. Now you have to have a different perspective. And that's one of the most difficult transitions I ever made in my career.
Right. That's such a good place to take a break. And I'm
Sure.
still going to continue. But just for those of you watching, listening, please, if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the chat. If you're going to see this on Spotify, on Apple, please do give us a 5-star rating. If you do like what you're hearing so far. If you're watching this on YouTube, just make sure to subscribe. Another thing that I will mention is that we are launching the PM Therapy Substack September 1. So do go ahead and subscribe for free. You can do that on my profile, or there will be a link below this, right? So where we're going to bring you more discussions like this, more articles and more in-depth things. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank, but it's going to be there are going to be a lot of good things there, and we're trying to build a community. So now, just coming back to the show. So I'm speaking with John. John was a librarian, now is a PM leader, and we're having a very fascinating conversation on like how PMs can develop executive presence. So John, just going back, I think this is such an important topic, because many PMs, we, just like you mentioned, we negotiate at the task level, but we need to go higher. So what would you advise to somebody who's like, okay, yes, I need to work on my executive presence? What would you advise to them?
Yeah.
How would you coach them to now get there?
I would advise them in their, first and foremost, in the mindset. Okay. Mindset meaning it's not just that I own like the outputs of my project, right? And you don't necessarily have full ownership of the outcomes from the output, but you have to understand what the outcomes are going to be, what the intent is, right? How is that going to get measured? But the other thing too is, can you craft a way of working with senior leadership? Can you own that? Because you don't, once you reach a certain level, you really don't have a manager anymore. You have people above you in the organizational food chain. That's always true. There's always someone above you. But that person above you is not going to expect to be able or have to tell you what to do on a daily basis. You can't expect that anymore. What you have to do now is create agreements with the people who are making the big decisions about how you're going to work with them.
Okay.
And that's not, oh, what's your cadence of reporting or anything like that. It's more like understanding the preferences and the social dynamic and the social network and who's talking to whom and who isn't. And those are multifaceted. This is where like you separate out the people who can hack it at the top and the people who can't. Because now you're a mover and a shaker for the sake of your project. Two other things. First one, I would say is, can you create healthy space between yourself and your project, right? So to avoid burnout. Can you say, I own the outputs of the project and I own my role in producing the outcomes I want from them, without saying I am worthless if I can't do that, right? If you can say, oh, I'm tied up in my value with the value of my project. You gotta be able to step away from that. And at the lower levels, we tend not to do that. We tend to be wrapped up in the outcomes, right? Can I succeed? I'm a successful project manager if my project succeeded, right? I'm a successful person if my project succeeded. Like now you need to have the objectivity from above, right? From the 10,000 foot view. Can I understand objectively my relationship to the project and set good boundaries? That's something that you and I were talking about before we got rolling here, was burnout is quite high among project managers. And I think that's because we have a lot of attachment to our work. And it's good to care about your work. It's good to like your work, but I tell project managers all the time, don't love your work, because the work is not going to love you back. You can like it, don't love it. And that's kind of where I burned out on librarianship. Is I was loving the work, and eventually it just stopped. It didn't love me back,
Hmm.
and I burned out in a big way. So like that's another big important thing that you need to do to survive in project management.
Hmm. Okay, so a couple of things. How do you? So I hear you. Like project managers need to be more strategic,
Mm-hmm.
but we also still need to be tactical. A lot of times you don't have another person who is
Sure.
handling tactical. So how do you sort of straddle both levels
Yeah.
effectively in a
You're the integrator.
right?
You're the integrator. You are the bridge builder from the task level, the tactical, to the strategic. You can't neglect either side. But if you err on one side or the other, I always think you should err on the strategic side,
Okay.
not the tactical. And it's not good for those of us who are optimizers. Project managers are optimizers. But it's a myth. You can never get to 100% efficiency because you're dealing with people. And after you pass a certain level, and I don't know a number, is it 70%, 80% efficiency? Anything more than that, you're just making people into machines and they're going to resent you for it.
Right.
So like, yeah, I think we want to optimize the task level because that's what can be optimized to a certain extent. And when you optimize at the task level, right? Now you have a commitment to making like the schedule perfect. You have a commitment to spending the budget the right way. And those are things that you should have a flexible mindset for, because the goal is not to have a perfect schedule. Project managers they have a hard time seeing beyond that because like I need the schedule to deliver on time. But you have to understand, can we go a couple of extra weeks in order to achieve the outcome that we need? Is the organization willing to spend those 2 weeks? You need to have that conversation. That's more important than a perfect schedule. I'm not saying blow up your schedules, right? But I'm just saying, like, how do you prioritize your approach to the work? That's the thing, right? We're talking task tracking right now. We're talking, dependencies. We're talking about resource allocation and over allocation and leveling my resources and crashing my project. And that's all necessary, but it's all for nothing if you're not meeting the bigger picture. Right. So what I say is that like that stuff's good and important, but that stuff needs to be in the back seat when you're driving the car.
Right. Right. Okay. That makes complete sense. So what I'm hearing is, back to your point, you need to be very aware and clear on the strategic outcomes and use that to sort of negotiate at the task level, right? So if you deliver on time, if that doesn't mean anything strategically, then yeah, your project is all for naught, right? So
Yeah.
maybe it might make more sense to extend your project by 2 weeks or 3 weeks to meet a strategic outcome. At the end of the day, a project doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's supposed to serve bigger outcomes, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna ask you another question then, right? What are project managers subject matter experts in?
I would say execution.
Execution, right? The boardroom, the folks upstairs, right? The people who wear the suit jackets to work, right? They're not subject matter experts in execution,
Right.
but they have to make decisions about it. So at the operational level, at the leadership team level, you are the subject matter expert for them about execution. And that your obligation there is not just to execute, it's to help them understand the stakes so they can be good stakeholders. And that means your job is not just to execute, it's to build stakeholders, to build good ones. And that's like, when I realized that, I was like, this is wild, right? That this blew my mind because it's true. They don't know, and they don't know. It's what my library school professor, Dr. McCall, always used to say. He said it's called metacognitive miscalibration. It's when you don't know what you don't know. And our senior stakeholders don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So you're saying, how do I bridge that, right? Between the task level, between the senior level, it's you have to position yourself, frame your mind and your communication, not from a status reporting circumstance, and not even just to give them options as to how to move forward. Your goal now is to grow them into stakeholders that can make intelligent decisions about execution, because they can't right now. They don't even know the stakes. They're stakeholders, but they don't even know their stakes.
Right. That's such a powerful way to reframe the PM role, right? It's like we have the table, have a seat at the table, and there are different people that have different seats at the table. Engineering has a seat at the table. You have somebody at the C-suite that represents the technical team. Product has a seat at the table. Marketing has a seat at the table. PMs, we also have a seat at the table because our own discipline and area is execution. Like, how do all these different pieces fit together? And that's what we know. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. Actually, we should really own that, because nothing would actually come to fruition without execution, right? So we should really own that. And that's a very important part of the business, because they won't be able to hit their goals.
Yes. Right? And that's the thing, is without us, they fail.
Right.
We're there for a reason. But the reason is not to, make sure that my dependencies are correct on my critical path.
Right.
That's not why I was hired. And this is something that, like, there are a lot of people starting to talk about this now, especially with AI. AI is prompting us to think more about these things, and I think that's a healthy thing. I was looking at a Facebook post this morning about, like, how do you position yourself in your career as a PM? It's about owning your seat at the table.
Right.
And that's executive presence. When you effectively own the seat at the table, and you can push the ball forward, you can push the organization, nudge it forward, help them make good decisions, that's executive presence, because you now have a seat at the executive table.
Right. And what's so amazing about that is because that is what they care about. Like, all the leaders, like, if you can just help me achieve my goals, like, I will love you. Right. So it's not like you're not coming there feeling like a nuisance, like, okay, because I think that a lot of us carry that weight.
Right.
Like, all right, I might just head count. No.
Right.
Like, I want to help you hit your OKRs. I want to help you hit your revenue goals. And just based on my experience, like, this is not going to work, right? Based on my experience, like, we need this level of support, or we need, we need to be staffed properly, or this team chemistry is not working properly. So, and that's why we can advise people, because, we are partners now. We are strategic partners.
And I spoke with a project manager on LinkedIn once, and he said, that's not my job. That's not my job. That's my sponsor's job. My job is to take care of the schedule and the tasks and all of those things. And I simply disagree. I think that you have expertise that your sponsor just is not going to have.
Right.
And if that's missing, they're going to make the wrong choices about execution.
Right.
And then they're going to fail. And consequently, you're going to fail. Right? Because your name is on that as the project manager. And if enough of your projects fail, they'll find someone else to run the projects.
Right. And I've just found that in my career that when you do this, you're just treated very differently. Like, because I know, there are times that executives will call me, to the room, and we'll have a one-on-one, and we're discussing people that are even, like, above my level, right? And you are, because they have your, you have their ear and all of that. So you're treated more as a partner, as opposed to, just a doer, so to speak. So let me ask you this, John. Do you think the number one obstacle is just mindset? Like, why many PMs are not thinking and approaching their work this way?
Maybe. I mean, obstacle depends on the person and the situation, right? And sometimes a PM is gun shy. right? There's like once bitten, twice shy. Like they've been in a toxic environment where you couldn't say anything to leadership, and they kind of carry that with them. Sometimes there's a cultural barrier to being able to operate this way. They're like, no, we want you to be a task worker. We want you to be a task manager. And if that's the case, then you just have to, that's fine. You can continue to do that and work that way. You just need to understand they're not actually asking you to be a trusted guide and a project manager. They're asking you to be a task manager, and that's okay too, right? I'm not going to say that's bad or evil. You just have to know your environment. The biggest barriers are, I think, yes, mindset, but also willingness to experiment on the job under live fire and do something new. And that's difficult, right? We're not usually willing to iterate on our relationship with the COO. But that's a lack of communication, right? That's the distinction between expectations, which live inside me, and agreements, which I make with people outside me. And you have to make the expectations explicit, because the COO has expectations for me and I have expectations for them. And I haven't spoken that out loud. I haven't made that explicit. We can't even begin a negotiation about how we work together. So it's like, yeah, the barrier here is mindset, yes, but it's also communication, right? You need to get into good habits of executive level communication, which is based on expectations to agreements, which should also be your chartering process, by the way. Your chartering should be expectations getting made explicit into agreements. And then holding everyone accountable, holding yourself accountable, and working as people with common goal, even if you're not at the same exact level within the company.
Right. I just want to make that practical for people. So when you say, expectations, so like, what can you just maybe make that a bit more practical?
Yeah. So sit down with your stakeholders and make a list, or bring a list, or help them work through building out a list of what do I expect from John, right? Doing this project, right? How do I, if nothing else, let's say communication level, right? What do I expect from John in terms of his communication about this? Like, what do I expect written reports, right? Do I expect certain KPIs? Do I expect he's going to talk to me in a certain way? Do I expect he's going to sugarcoat it or shoot from the hip or whatever? And then I can write my expectations for this relationship, and we can have a conversation. We can start building this out. I have had good success working with senior stakeholders in the past, where the first thing I do when I get into the role is I write a working contract for us. The social contract, where I say, I'm going to communicate this way during these hours, this stuff. I'm going to set boundaries here, but then you're going to get this as well, and you're going to communicate this way, and things like that. I've found good practice categorizing, saying, okay, COO, you're going to throw these things at me. I'm going to ask for some clarity about them. I'm going to have 3 categories, 3 buckets I put them in, right? The directives, which you have to do right away, right? The stretch goals and the ideas. Nothing's getting thrown in the garbage, but I may come back to the COO and say, is this a 1, a 2, or a 3? And they might say, oh, that's a 3, right? Just put it on the list. We'll continue to talk about it. But that's something now that's explicit. I have a framework I can work from for this relationship. It's craft a way of working. And if you want more ideas for things to do that, I'm happy to talk to people. Find me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a DM. I'm happy to talk.
Right. No, that's a good place to end, because I know you have a hard stop.
I do, unfortunately.
Yeah. So no, this was really fascinating, and for those of you that I'm looking at the chat quickly, I don't see any questions. I do see more comments. So thank you, Kyrie. Thank you, Sunny. Love. Thank you, Vinay. Godwin, Ogechukwu, Santiago, Vinay. Thank you all for commenting. But John, this was such a fascinating conversation. I really like we went philosophical, abstract, also tactical as well. I wish we had more time, but I know you have to go. So if people want to reach out to you, they can do so on LinkedIn, right?
They can find me on LinkedIn. My link out from my profile is my booking link. Feel free to grab 30 minutes with me. You can email me, jconnolly@v3model.com. That's V as in Victor, the number 3, model.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, John. And Carol, yeah, you will be able to view this on LinkedIn. Just go on my page. You'll be able to view the whole recording. All right. Thank you all. Take care now. See you
Thanks
next
so
time.
much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.